Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Anonymization session of 2023. I'm actually happy to introduce Abhilash Soundarrajan, who's my fellow alumni, I would say, Anna University. Of course, we're different by almost a decade and a half. Abhilash graduated in 2005 in Electronics and Communications, and he pursued his MBA in IIM Bangalore in Enterprise Management in 2015 and 17. He also did a couple of courses in emerging markets with his GNAM program. He started his career with the Tramco Systems as a network engineer, then 3i Infotech, worked as IT consultant at Serviceberry. Abhilash has been a long-standing employee of Aruba Networks. Now it's in HPE company in various capacities as a network strategist, business strategist, as well as he is an entrepreneur for Zero Trust and blockchain and for IoT in Aruba or as HPE. He started his Privasapien in 2020. It's his own company. And this basically he is kind of leveraging the AI-enabled unified clean technology and making end-to-end encrypted messaging and platform systems. In fact, Privasapien is also incubated and startup from National COE of DSCI. And they also won awards in the DSI Special Jury Awards for his product and solutions. Typically, the solution basically identifies how the data privacy need to be separated and the relevance. And without going much into the content, I request Abhilash to take over and deliver the session. Welcome, Abhilash.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, sir. Thank you for having me as part of the interaction in FTPPI. Great to be part of this session. So we are a privacy engineering company, and we are really passionate about privacy tech. So with privacy regulations coming across the globe, we are entering a privacy era, and we require right set of technologies and tools to meet these emerging privacy regulatory requirements across the globe. So this is what we found as an opportunity, which is for which products and services are not available in the market. That's how we started Privasapien. We have a short presentation. We have a very interesting subject of anonymization today, which is at times one of the most misused terms in the privacy parlance landscape. So we would have a perspective of what is technically full anonymization, what kind of technologies are present, what do we do, and how do we visualize risk, mitigate risk, what are the benefits of true anonymization in India as well as global landscape. So we'll have a quick, we'll have a discussion. We'll also have a, we'll also look at how anonymous data would look like, what kind of mathematical proofs we provide, and then we can have a I want this session to be very interactive, so we can have question and answers at any point. You can feel free to stop me and ask questions as you feel is appropriate in a given scenario. Cool. So I would share my screen. Let me know once you're able to see my screen, and then we'll take it forward from there. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, thank you so much. So the topic for today is anonymization. To understand anonymization, we also need to understand what is privacy enhancing technologies. And even before that, we have to understand what is privacy risk and what are the different kinds of privacy attacks which are possible, which have some of the very interesting attacks which have happened in the past. And hence, what is the impact? What is the technical requirement? And hence, how do you unlock data without violating people's privacy? It's a very interesting concept. It's not just anonymization, but it touches at the core of definition of what is personal data, what is non-personal data, how re-identification can happen, and how do we prevent it and thus unlock data in the emerging privacy era. So our vision from privacy engineering perspective, if data is the new oil and internet is the new oil field, privacy technologies are the new refineries, and AI systems are the new engines. And today this privacy refinery layer is completely missing. And we are building a spectrum of products which can build this layer for organizations and businesses so that they can succeed in this privacy era and build systems and services which are compliant, which takes care of people privacy, at the same time unlocks data for value creation. So this is a broad vision. and we started building products and services. We have filed around 9 patents. 2 of them are granted. We have won Niti Aayog's Atmanirbhar Bharat Challenge Award for healthcare data collaboration. We have won DSCI's privacy challenge for privacy due diligence and also for purpose limitation of data. We are one of the early movers in the country in privacy engineering. We are interacting with a lot of consulting firms, cloud platforms, policy think tanks, and early adopters across industry verticals in creating and implementing cutting-edge privacy engineering services in their ecosystems. We recently got our funding from a US-based VC firm, and we are working with customers in different geographies because privacy engineering is very fundamental, mathematical in nature. So this is equally applicable in Europe or US or in India, irrespective of the regulations, because the foundational understanding is very much the same. So how do you build a perspective? Or in the cybersecurity world, I understand that many of you have a background in cybersecurity, and privacy is a very new area as such. So in cybersecurity, we have red teams and blue teams. Red team basically tries to understand vulnerable areas in an ecosystem, and then the blue teams basically help mitigate those risks by putting corresponding security controls in place or safeguards in place, so that the entire ecosystem is secure, right? So there is nothing equivalent of it in the privacy world today. Let us say we are doing data protection impact assessment. It is pretty much a manual process globally. Even if we look at products like OneTrust, a DPO or a CISO looks at a data flow, and then he manually fills in a checklist, and that's about it, right? We clearly know that this is not how future would look like, or even present this may not be suitable, because these decisions need to be automated. These decisions need to be auditable, should be beyond biases of individuals, and it should have a technical and mathematical backing of the risk perception as it happens in other verticals, right? So that's where one of the first products come in, which is Privacy X-ray. So Privacy X-ray helps organizations in understanding privacy risk in data in a very in-depth manner, where it tries to simulate different kinds of privacy attacks, and says that these are the different levels of risk present in data, and hence this is the overall risk of this data flow in a given context. And then business can build on top of it, saying how this risk can be mitigated, what can be the regulatory overheads in a given scenario, right? Then once you understand the risk, then you have to mitigate the risk, and there are different ways of mitigation. One of the ways of mitigation and doing data minimization the right way is anonymization. So that's where the other product, Event Horizon, comes, which enables organization in reducing the privacy risk, and we quantify it with actual numbers mathematically, and enable organization in meeting privacy requirements in a mathematical way, so that it is provable, auditable, and verifiable in their data ecosystems. So before we get into anonymization, we have to understand what are the different kinds of privacy risks in the
Abhilash,
Yeah.
Abhilash, this is Ramesh here. The previous slide. So what I understand is Privacy X-ray is a tool you are talking about.
Yes.
Which will scan. Yeah.
So let us say if there is we'll go into the details, but
Sure.
at a high level, it will look at a data set and say that this is the level of risk, privacy risk in this data set. Number between 0 to 100. Right?
Okay. Okay.
And then Event Horizon is the anonymization product, which anonymizes the data and hence reduces the privacy risk from, let us say, 80 to 15.
Okay.
So that's the perspective we have to look at anonymization, because the objective is to reduce risk, right? Because data, the risk in data is a spectrum. It can be from direct PII, which results in direct identification, to quasi-identifiers and statistical data, which can result in indirect identification of individuals. So this is the definition of personal data, right? A data which is directly or indirectly identifying an individual is a personal data. As per GDPR, and same is being reflected across regulations. Now, this is the fundamental definition that you have to look at and understand what is anonymization from here. So anonymization is basically a process where you have reduced risk so much that the potential for re-identification of an individual in that context is very, very negligible. So how do you do that is a challenge, and it is not just removing the PIIs, but it is also about ensuring that the other quasi-identifiers and statistical data also are privacy preserved in a way that it does not result in re-identification of individuals, or the probability is very, very less.
So Abhilash, while I'm sure, I don't know, maybe we should wait till you move further in the presentation, but just when you talk about data set, right?
Yeah.
Supposing an organization has a data set and which has got a lot of identifiers, right?
Yeah.
And even let's say by some tool, by this X-ray tool or Event Horizon tool, you remove the identifiers from that particular data set, right? The fact would still be that as an organization, you would have from dataset A, you would have created dataset B. Okay. Whereas dataset A had identifiers, dataset B is with removed identifiers, right? Until unless at an organizational level, the dataset A, the original dataset A has been completely deleted securely, right? The risk in dataset B might have gone down, but at an organizational level, the privacy risk would still remain as long as dataset A or the removed identifiers are still in the control or within the infrastructure of the organization, right?
Correct, absolutely correct. So in privacy, there is in privacy threat modeling, there is the world's first framework called Linden, which is a privacy threat model, right? World's first privacy threat model.
Okay.
What we have to look at in privacy is like similar to security. We are not looking, of course, we have to look at the overall risk as well. You need to have corresponding consents for it, and then you'll have to understand the overall risk. But for every flow of data, or for every application of data, every processing of data, you need to understand the level of risk in data. And this is where, data protection impact assessment also comes as per a regulatory requirement of GDPR and even India's DPDP now, right? Where when there is a flow, let us say we are working with one of the large automobile company, where there's a single, let's say, or any company which creates a single customer view. All companies create it. Now, this is very, very risky, right? It has a lot of other attributes about the customer, as you rightly said. But when they are taking this, but for this, they have consent, right? There is risk, there is security risk, and it is privacy risk. Now, the security risk is data getting breached, and this is sensitive data. That is a security risk. Now, what is a privacy risk is, in case of privacy, customers would have consented for specific processing of the data for specific purposes, right? The customer would have told that you can get in touch with me in case, let us say, I am getting into some emergency. But for building your product, you should not use my personal data. Or building better algorithms or better profiling, you should not use my data. For that, customer would not have given consent. Now, this is the same data. So in case of privacy risk, it is about the purpose of, primarily, it is about purpose of usage of a specific data in a specific data flow, especially when there is automated processing involved. For example, you are building a big data ecosystem where you are analyzing data and you are taking automated decision on top of it, then it becomes very, very critical, and you have to understand the risk at a flow level. That's where it becomes data minimization, application, designing an application with privacy by design, privacy by default. In all these scenarios, it is the flow of data, or what data you are sharing for what purpose. Is this beyond the context which is approved or consented, or it is within the context, is the question. And this is where privacy risk becomes very, very important. And it is context dependent for which you are using the data or the flow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's I have the more details about how this event horizon
Excellent.
works.
Excellent, Abhilash. Excellent. I think, Subrite, the key is here what he said, right?
Yeah.
The difference, we need to have the difference between security risk versus privacy risk. Simple. To answer your question. Great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So there are different kinds of privacy attacks to start with to understand what is privacy risk, right? For example, there is something called inference attack, linkage attack. So in the state of Massachusetts in US, there was a requirement for healthcare analytics, right, to understand and do research on healthcare data of the state. Now, the mayor of the state published after removing the PII information, he published the information for research, considering that it's not, it is PII is removed, so it's not considered personal data anymore. So he published. What happened was, somebody took the data set. It had date of birth, it had zip code, and it had gender. This combination of date of birth, zip code, and gender by itself is unique for 80% of people. Found out to be 80% for people, it was unique. So just with this combination, they took the voter ID data set, mapped it, and then they could re-identify the individual. For example, to give an example, you may be the only person with your date of birth in your apartment, right? Even if your name is removed, if I take a voter ID data set, I'll be able to find your name just with your date of birth and apartment name, right? So this is called as inference attack. This is starting with linkage. You linkage data set, and then you infer that this is the person. And even before that, you do a singling out attack, where from a data set, you try to identify people with unique combination of quasi-identifiers. That's the singling out attack. Then you build on top of it, you do a linkage attack, where you link it with another data set where similar attributes are present. And then you try to re-identify the person or infer about that person, or try to do a background knowledge attack, where you say that multiple people are with similar attributes. So the person that I know should be one among them. So he has this attribute, something like that. So there are spectrum of privacy attacks. We will get into the details in the subsequent slides. But so data breach is more from a security perspective, but from a privacy perspective, when you look at it, there are a bunch of attacks which build on top of one another and result in the final re-identification and harm, privacy harm, which can be created to an individual, right? So we have to understand this, and we have to clearly understand the difference between cyber security and privacy. And this is very fundamental. The difference between cyber security and privacy is that security stops at the point where you give access to the data to a person, whether it is a breach or you give access to a person, whether it be after authentication or giving key or whatever mechanism through which you achieve it. But once you give access to the data, you have no control on how that person will use the data. Somebody would say that he's taking the data for for optimizing the product, but he would use the data to psychographically micro-target a user, profile a user, and target a user, right? In which case, he has the right to get the key, right? Authentication, he has the right. But what kind of authorization he has to use the data, it's very difficult to control, because he has authorization for a purpose. So he has got the data, but he's abusing and using the data for some other purpose. Now, this can't be solved with security. This is beyond security. This is where privacy comes in. So the question for privacy is, even after somebody getting the data, he should not be able to learn more than what he is supposed to learn, right? So let us say you have right to look at a picture, but you cannot look at the picture. You can look at the picture only from one perspective. You cannot look at the picture from other perspective. How difficult it is, right? Let us say you can look at the picture of, let us say, ice cream and try to understand what is the temperature it can be, but you should not look at an ice cream thinking of eating it, right? It is very, very difficult, and this is not a problem solved by security, right? Security either gives you access to the picture or it does not give you access to the picture. That's it. But how can you use the picture? How can you look at the picture? It's not solved by security. I'm just trying to build an analogy here, right? So privacy is about controlling how a person would use a data once he got access to the data, and that's where it is much, much more challenging and much, much more fundamental for the future of the digital era. So these are the different kinds of attacks, and these are the challenges. So let us look at some real life examples of what has happened in the recent past in India. I'm not giving other theoretical examples from the world, but in India we found that one of the city corporations went ahead and published exact GPS coordinates of COVID positive patients during the first wave. So the COVID first wave was gone, then it became absolutely normal. Like, the next person is COVID positive, we don't care today much, right? But those information, their GPS coordinates, their houses, all those information were published, which is against their consent, right? There was no consent involved in the case. And you can today re-identify the person directly, saying that, okay, this house, this person, this age, so this is going to be this person, right? He had COVID. And with this different kinds of attacks, his identity, his pictures can be got from Facebook, his profiles, his spending pattern, whatever he's doing, it can be identified. And then once you understand that he is of specific income category, then there can be other kinds of financial frauds and other things can be done, which, there were even cases where people were abducted once their COVID information was published, because somebody sent an ambulance and saying that this person has COVID and government has sent this ambulance, and then that person was abducted. It was actually an abduction. So different kinds of privacy harms are possible once privacy is leaked, which is beyond consent, and it does not require PII to be published. This is something very important to understand, because even without PII, a person can be very unique. He can be singled out, and he can be linked with his other data sets which has PII. For example, voter ID data set, or data sets collected from social media, from dark web, etc., to re-identify the person. That way, even though the initial data set does not have PII, through different attacks, his PII can be re-identified. And this is something that we have to understand. So hence, the traditional de-identification techniques are very limited in the purpose, achieving the purpose that we want, especially like things like tokenization and masking. Though they just hide portion of PIIs, it still leaves a significant portion of your quasi identifiers, like zip code, your date of birth, and things like those. And if you start doing masking for them, then the utility of data almost becomes zero, and you can't use the data to a significant extent. And this becomes a very fundamental problem in using, and this becomes a problem between privacy and utility, right? To solve this, traditional techniques are not sufficient. We will come to that later, but we are looking at how different kinds of attacks can be done to re-identify individuals. So we saw the re-identification attack, linkage attack, singling out attack, and linkage attack. This is an inference attack. Let us say that your neighbor has participated in a survey, or she took COVID test yesterday, right? And then when you look at the output, or de-identified results of yesterday's test, where your neighbor went and took the test, she is a female with 18 to 24 age in your pin code, and you see that everybody who had taken the test with these attributes are COVID positive. From this, you can infer that your neighbor also is COVID positive. This is called inference attack. So when you are publishing certain data sets, it's very important that sensitive attributes have to be grouped in a way they are similar. The grouping is similar to global distribution. Global distribution means whatever is the distribution of COVID positive and negative people in a data set, individual groups within that should also have a similar distribution. Else, the probability of re-identification or inference from the data set will become much higher. We are slightly getting into the statistical portions of it, but I'm just wanting to give you a flavor of how different kinds of privacy attacks happen. Then there is something called homogeneity attack or collective privacy attack, where an attacker does not care about who the exact individual is, but given that he knows that the individual has a specific attribute of interest to him, he will target them. Right? That's collective privacy attack or homogeneity attack, where everybody are of similar type. These are some very high level examples of privacy attacks. There are a lot of new privacy attacks which are coming as we speak. So I'm looking at some of the most important privacy attacks which are mentioned by the working party of GDPR from EU, which is the most mature ecosystem where we have seen about these different kinds of attacks. So probably I'll just quickly pause here and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, that is Ramesh here.
Yeah, yes, sir.
A quick question. I know the example what you taken now, the COVID is a what do you call a systematic or maybe community impacted one.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, there may be a difference for that. But similar thing, where do you see such a thing happening in the social media kind of a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, every industry vertical, you take, for example, social media. In fact, micro targeting of people was banned a couple of weeks back in EU. EU passed a regulation or penalized Facebook or Meta now, saying that they can no more do targeted advertisements on the Meta platform in EU, which is fundamentally their business model. 95% of the revenue come from that.
That's exactly
right. So when you are looking at attributes of people and they say that you can't even have data set where multiple people have similar attributes, then it becomes a very difficult problem for them to solve and advertise. So it's a very important problem in advertisement, in insurance, in finance, in loans, in almost every vertical. Today data is a new oil, right? Without data, without looking at these nuances, you can't make business decisions at all. So for every industry vertical, this is very, very critical.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on privacy attacks, its importance? Okay, I'll move on to the next one, and if at all there are any accumulated questions, we'll have a look at it. So what is the solution, right? So privacy, so we are in privacy 3.0 today. We are a privacy 3.0 company. Privacy 1.0 is basically traditional techniques like tokenization and masking, right? We know that it's very inefficient. It can result in different kinds of attacks that we saw just some time back. Privacy 2.0 are basically compliance softwares which helps in capturing the complaint status, or probably at the maximum try to identify PII in your ecosystem, right? These are privacy 2.0 companies, for example, OneTrust, where it's very important for you to capture your complaint status and prove complaints, but they don't touch or process the data. They don't privacy preserve the data. They don't ensure that the risk is understood in a very intelligent way, things like those, right? They capture your whatever you say is your complaint status, they capture it and help you meet the requirements of today, right? This does not help you in unlocking your data for value creation, or enabling you in collaboration, or understanding the risk deeper, doing intelligent data protection impact assessment. These things are not possible in privacy 2.0. That's where privacy 3.0 comes in, which is primarily driven by privacy enhancing technologies, which starts with enabling you, understanding risk from different kinds of privacy attacks. We are the first globally, in my understanding, to my knowledge, of doing an intelligent data protection impact assessment and doing a single privacy risk score for data flows globally. So what we enable organizations is to start the journey to understand the risk in data or in data flows, build a governance structure around it, put controls in terms of PET-based controls so that the privacy risk is mitigated, then communicate the understanding of the risk and mitigations to multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem, and in the process, protect data flows and protect customers' privacy. And this is the NIST framework, privacy framework, which was published. So we are building products and services which can enable organizations in accelerating their privacy journey across multiple components in their data ecosystem. So, so when you look at a data set, right? Technically speaking, you can put all attributes into three broad buckets, which is PII, quasi-identifier, and statistical data. This is very important to understand anonymization. So even if you don't have PIIs, just the quasi-identifier and statistical data can be enough to re-identify an individual in a data set, as we saw earlier, right? Just a combination of car model, age, and street name, right? You may have a very unique car model with you may be the only person with a specific age, specific car model in your street, right? Just these three attributes without any PII can result in re-identification of you in a data set, right? So what we do in terms of anonymization is understand people with different, in a population or in a data set, people with attributes which are similar or close to one another, then aggregate them, merge them into a single closest possible attribute, so that the level of privacy preservation is achieved or level of grouping is achieved beyond which a person can't be singled out, and thus the data can also be unlocked with minimal loss, retaining the utility of data and being compliant with privacy regulations, because now the data has become from personal, the data has become non-personal. This is as per GDPR's Article 26, or then there was a deep dive on Working Party 29 on anonymization techniques. So we do based on this, and we are the first globally to provide mathematical proofs of anonymization in a way, and in a very simple way, like a graph where you can see that all the group sizes are more than what is the minimum required group size as per the regulatory requirement. So thus your data becomes non-personal, and now you can unlock data for value creation. You can give it for downstream analytics or multiple purposes without violating regulatory requirements, at the same time meeting business objectives. Right. So this is a very, very important slide. So let us say you have a product team or whoever is a data controller who is collecting data, and on the right side you have a data processor, let us say a marketeer, and then you have a DPO or a CISO. Now the data controller wants to share this data with the data processor, but this flow has to be approved by the DPO or CISO as per data minimization, data privacy by design requirements, and do a data protection impact assessment. Today, what typically happens is that the DPO looks at the data, he's forced to take a decision, just fill a checklist and say whether the risk is mitigated or the risk is okay or not, which is a great risk the DPO is taking today on his heads without any tools or services. Right. So what we do is we empower DPO with a privacy X-ray, which simulates these different kinds of privacy attacks on the data, and then gives a single risk score based on the data's, the kind of attributes the data has and the level of risk score it has. And we provide a very detailed report. I'll show you the report as well shortly, couple of sample reports. So we give first of its kind single risk score for a data flow, saying that this is the risk score of the data. And the business can take a decision whether this level of risk is acceptable in a given scenario or not. For example, a finance organization giving data to an insurance company or an analytics company, right? In this scenario, is this level of risk acceptable or not? Let's say the bank is selling loan fulfillment data to an insurance company, right? But the customer has not agreed for this kind of analytics or underwriting analytics, in which case the data cannot be sent. Now, the organization can take a call whether they can reduce the risk and share the data, in which case it is not violating any privacy risk, or not share the data, right? So they can, let's say they use anonymization. In this case, let's say they use event horizon, and then they anonymize the data. Once they anonymize the data, they can once again send it to privacy X-ray. Now they can see that the risk of the data has come down from 85 to 15. while retaining the utility of the data for downstream processing. Let us say underwriting or understanding, in which scenarios, what kind of, people with what kind of attributes can, let's say, result in NPA or not, right? And then credit scoring based on that, without violating actual privacy of people. So from the data set, you will not be able to re-identify people, but still you would be able to build a model which can predict, credit worthiness of people at a population level, right? Which is the objective, which you can achieve without violating people's privacy. So this is the kind of data ecosystem which will be built for the future, and you require these kind of products which will help you visualize the risk and mitigate the risk to unlock data for the ecosystem. And this use case is across industry vertical. It can be in automobile, where cars are getting connected and your location information is being seen, which can be used for multiple advertisements or entertainment or multiple purposes, or your healthcare data or your insurance data or your e-commerce data. Everything is becoming platformized, right? A central party collecting a lot of data and doing analytics on top of it. This becomes a very fundamental requirement, and these are the products that we are building. Now we'll get into analytics and anonymization part of it, but if there are any questions, we'll look at it and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, well, this is Nagendra.
Hey Nagendra.
I have two questions here.
Yeah.
Is this anonymization happens at data at rest or data at transmit? Number one.
Yeah, this
Number
happens.
two.
Yeah, sorry.
Number two, if the patient in terms of healthcare framework, compliance, if patient wants to execute his rate of portability, how does it? Obviously, you'll have to re-identify everything and put it back into the single bucket and give to him for his readability or transportable purpose, whatever it is. How does it work in that cases?
Good questions. So anonymization is typically a batch process, right? You aggregate data to some extent. Let's say you are a hospital, right? You are giving data to an insurance company downstream or to an analytics company downstream. It need not be real time, where you aggregate data on a daily basis, anonymize it, and give it to downstream party so that they can build services and analytics on top of it. It can also be near real time, where you aggregate for a few minutes or few hours and share the data, because anonymization is hiding data or personalities in plain sight. You cannot do it to individual entries, but when you are grouping entries is when you will try to hide it in plain sight, right? That's anonymization. So it's typically anonymization is a batch process. Okay, does it answer the first question?
Yeah, sure, I got it.
Yeah, thank you. On the second question, patient or a data subject or data principal has the right to portability or erasure only for personal data, right? Not for non-personal data. And once you anonymize, it is not re-identifiable data, right? So if you have done tokenization, pseudonymization, then when customer is doing right to erasure or right to portability, those are applicable. But once customer has consented for anonymized use of his data, then it's a one-way process. Nobody can re-identify. The whole purpose of doing anonymization is that that data is not re-identifiable anymore. So that data becomes non-personal and that is not touched. And this is the strength of anonymization, right? Because you have your data 100% for sure for you to do all downstream purposes, and this data will not be taken back, which is very important for model building and for decision making in organizations. Does it make sense?
All right, but HIPAA, even though I consented for anonymization, it gives me a provision to port my data whenever is required, whatever is required for different purposes. I being a patient, I being a caretaker, whatever it is.
So HIPAA, see, there is a separate HIPAA privacy rule where there are a couple of kinds of anonymization or de-identification. Especially what we are speaking about is the expert determination method. So under expert determination method, if you look at it, it's a statistical method where the personal data becomes non-personal. So I don't know,
Okay. Gotcha. Huh.
right? I don't know, once it becomes non-personal, I don't think, portability or other things come into picture, because the data is not personal anymore. For example, you have non-personal data of 100 people. One person has asked for removing his data, right? Now the data itself is not re-identifiable. Then you won't even know which row belongs to that person, right? How will you remove the data? It's not possible. So the data, and that's the guarantee, right? The data becomes non-personal, so it does not, um, it's no more bound by the data subject rights. It is beyond data subject rights.
All right, that's good. Let's go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So, and this is clearly mentioned in, clause 26 of GDPR, right, where it says that once the data is anonymized, then none of the requirements of GDPR are applicable on the anonymous data. So none of the data subject rights, portability right, right to information, right to modification, right to erasure, none of them are applicable because it has become non-personal data. So all these rights are applicable only on personal data.
Abhilash,
Yeah.
Abhilash, is it right to interpret now with the kind of explanation what you've given? The data which need to be under the kind of gambit of providing, adhering to the data subject rights, that still I will hold as a data set. And from that data sets, wherever I have a consent of the data subject to anonymize the data for any other purpose which I wanted to use it, okay, for profiling, marketing, whatnot.
Yeah.
So still the data subjects rights which is there, if it is applicable, still I'm holding the data with the security postures around it to ensure that there is no data breach happening. And the same data set is being anonymized for different purpose with their, of course, their consent. Is that the right way to interpret it? So I hold both the data sets now.
Correct, exactly, right? So organizations in the future will hold two kinds of data sets.
That's
right? One is personal data, other is non-personal data. Your obligations and risks and overhead for personal data is going to be tremendous.
Right.
So people won't even allow you to touch personal data.
Right.
While you will create, let us say, two data lakes, right? One data lake is personal data lake, other data is non-personal data lake.
Right.
You will get easy access or comparatively easy access to non-personal data lake, but it is very, very difficult to get access to personal data lake, because today you give access to a S3 bucket, you don't know how many changes you make on a daily basis, right? And then you don't know where the data is getting breached.
There you are.
That is the fundamental problem, right? But when you create these two different data lakes, and you create a non-personal data lake, and you say that, okay, you take these for purposes, okay, even if there is a data breach happening on the non-personal data lake, it is not going to, the CISO or the DPO are not going to lose his job, right? Because this is not a regulatory violation. The violation comes when there is a data breach on the personal data.
Right.
And this is the fundamental difference.
Absolutely. So the first part, as we discussed, so there are two sets of data lakes. One, I hold the data set for all the kind of adherence to my regulations with security postures built around. And second thing, I'm anonymizing it for the way I want to do it. That's one.
Correct.
Second way to look at it, if I'm right, is let's say when the purpose is over and the data subject is moving out of my contract, is no more. He does not need anything. Then I probably take his consent and then move out of his data set from the personal data set. So I don't have to worry about any data breach. I think somebody had earlier asked about data deletion or etc. Right? Permanent deletion. Instead of permanently deleting it, I want to make use of the data for my own profiling or marketing purpose. I will move them into anonymization, and I will have I don't have to worry about the data anymore. It's no more belonging to my organization. It's only as part.
Absolutely brilliant. And this is directly reflecting in India's DPDP as well.
Tabs.
This,
Thank you.
right? This is directly
Yes.
reflecting. This is for archiving, for
Yes.
research, for all
Right.
these things. You can
Right.
anonymize the data and use so that the deletion does not come and then you don't lose valuable data.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Abhilash. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. So, so what would happen is you can anonymize data in different ways, based on the context. So we support context-based anonymization along with mathematical proofs. So for the same data, when you are giving it to an insurance company, you can anonymize based on the context they want, right? For example, let's say, polio droplet, they may want, age to be more precise in specific range, and, beyond a specific range, it's not required. And so, and then you look at it, hospitalization cost. In that context, age, you can anonymize in a different way. It is immaterial, but the number of days of hospitalization is much more critical attribute. They want lesser data loss in that space, right? So depending upon the purpose of downstream processing, you can anonymize data in different ways and create different mathematical proofs around it and unlock data for different purposes using intelligent anonymization. This is something very interesting and important to understand, right? So once you do it, you can also do different levels of anonymization where, same data, you can anonymize at different levels or different grades. Of course, business has to take a call what is acceptable level of risk and what is not. But you can say that, okay, I want to, reduce the risk at this level, because this is basically a, continuous scale. This is not a point beyond which this is free and point beyond which it's not free, right? This is probably a regulatory, parameter where in case of HIPAA, they say that till the time it is not singling out, is even GDPR says that till the time singling out is not possible, it is considered as anonymous data, right? Singling out means even if you do K is equal to 2, grouping of 2, even then it can be considered anonymous data. It depends upon interpretation. We provide you the tool and allow you to take the decision, allow you to configure the way you want to meet your business objectives for your business scenarios. That's what we do. So accordingly, you can privacy preserve the way you want and way you feel you are comfortable for your applications. So this is very interesting and very important to understand. And you can create from the same data set, you can create different kinds of flows depending upon what kind of utility is required downstream and what kind of data at what level of granularity is required for value creation downstream. Right? We have customers across the globe. For example, we have a European customer who is using privacy X-ray to understand. He has plugged into the data pipeline and visualizing the privacy risk of data. Indian PSU, which is handling around 700 hospitals, which is using for ABDM ecosystem. They are one of the earliest adopters in the country for ABDM. So where in ABDM, anonymization is a key layer, and we are the only company to offer full anonymization to our knowledge. So we are also a partner with AWS. They are taking us to multiple parties in the healthcare ecosystem as well. We are providing, working closely with a Fortune 500 company, a really big one in data ecosystem space, with both privacy X-ray and Event Horizon. We are also working with, another example, another vertical is a telco company. So the utility is beyond geographies and beyond verticals, because that's the nature of general data protection regulations, and we are seeing utility across the board. So the value proposition as such for the customers is that this accelerates their privacy journey. Whatever was manually taking much longer time, 2 to 3 weeks to get people, resources, look into it, can be done now in 5 minutes or less than that. Where you can't even take data out, now you can take data almost with 99% utility for downstream processing without violating regulatory requirements. And we provide extensive reporting in terms of privacy X-ray reports. Probably I'll show you one of the reports. So this is a privacy X-ray report. So it looks into the data and says that, the risk score is high, let's say 100. You have different kinds of attributes. There is one PII, there are 6 unique identifiers, there are 4 quasi identifiers, there are 6 daytime attributes. There are 2.
Abhilash,
Yeah.
is it okay if I have a question here?
Sure. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Now, kindly help me because quite interesting. Let's say my application, my product, in the healthcare application, typically what data it is going to hold. Okay. Let's say that the 16 identifiers of my HIPAA. Okay. Simple. Any data point is going to be a subset of it, in my opinion. Assume. Let's say that 16 data points I have. Now, all the 16 are PHI, right?
Okay.
It needs to be protected. Now, what is that privacy X-ray will do? I'm trying to understand it more, okay? Because let's say that in a cybersecurity scenario, I am giving an architecture. When I'm doing a threat modeling, it gives me, you need to handle this asset, at the time of connectivity. You need to handle this at the time of authorization. This you need to handle it like that.
Correct.
Keeping the 3 parameter CIA. Like that, what is the privacy X-ray will help me?
Very
Because
good question.
Very
good question. Because CIA, what is the equivalent of CIA in the privacy? We are getting there. So
Super.
Just bear with me for a minute. We'll get there. Okay?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We'll look into the different attributes. We'll classify and then give them a risk score, right? Mobile number is direct PII. Others are, let's say, quasi identifier, and statistical zip code is a quasi identifier. IFSC code is a quasi identifier, and things like those. Then based on this, we do a singling multiple privacy attack simulations, like singling out, linkage, inference attack on the data, and give you a risk score of what level of data can be singled out, what level of data can be potentially linkaged, and what level of outliers are present in the data, and how it will impact your likelihood versus severity matrix, which is very important. Any risk evaluation that you do, likelihood versus severity matrix is a very important part. So we do that. All these are automated, right? And then we come to what you were asking, which is what are the different attributes of privacy? And there is a world's first privacy threat model called as Linden. It's a European model where we are interacting with some of the researchers as well. So the attributes for privacy are linkability, identifiability, deniability, and detectability, information confidentiality, verifiable purpose of processing, and insight generation. So these are different attributes through which you can decide whether privacy violation is happening or not. So we provide an overall risk score, and for each of these attributes, what kind of mitigation and what kind of privacy safeguards can be done to protect it. It's a recommendation we make. We don't just stop there. We go ahead and say that, this level of risk would fall under this regulatory requirement under this clause of this act. And this we submit to the customer. Then customer can take a call whether he wants to mitigate or live with that risk, right? And let's say, linkability risk is very high, where anonymization is a solution. Or if, there are other requirements, for example, undetectability, where you still want to use your personal data, then there can be solutions like homomorphic encryption or things like those, which may be possible, may not be possible, right? These are different kinds of technical safeguards which are emerging. Now, if you want to live with the risk, which is in a lot of scenarios, right? Scenario like what you are saying, you have 16 PHIs in a data set, but your data set will have much more attributes as well. For example, temperature of a patient, pressure of a patient, multiple other attributes, right? So you have, and this is where the 3 broad buckets fall into, right? Your PII, quasi-identifier, and statistical data. Now, how much is PII? How much is quasi-identifier? How much is statistical data? You have to understand. Once you understand it, then you have to apply your data minimization principles. This is where data governance comes in. Then the DPO has this risk score with him, and he knows that these are the mitigations which are required. These are the risk he is carrying. Then he takes a business decision whether this level of risk is acceptable for this data flow or not. Let us say a hospital is giving data to an insurance company for monetization. Do they have the requisite consent for giving this data? Else it is not approved at all. Then he cannot give these PIIs. Then he have to do data minimization significantly. So what level of data minimization is required? How can he achieve? That's what we are recommending here, right? Then if he wants to live with the risk, then what kind of things need to be done? For example, data flow mapping has to be done. Ecosystem and business context needs to be identified. Data protection impact assessment needs to be done. Ecosystem risk management needs to be done. This is from an identification perspective, right? Then from governance perspective, they need to have both parties, whoever is receiving the party as well, right? They have to set up policies and process. They have to have a risk strategy. They need to have an awareness and training strategy. They need to have a grievance management framework in place. Similarly, in terms of control, they need to have consent management in place, data subject rights, data sharing. So these learnings we are bringing from cutting edge frameworks across the globe. So this is basically brought in from NIST privacy framework, which was published in 2020. So we are connecting our privacy attack simulation, our re-identification algorithms with which we identify the risk. Then we connect the risk to the mitigatory requirements. Then we connect the risk to regulatory requirement, and we say that if you want to reduce the risk, these are the things that you can do. If you want to live with the risk, these are the controls and processes you have to put in place for your ecosystem and your collaborators ecosystem. This is what we provide as part of Privacy XA.
So this also gives, just go up by just that table heading I want to see.
Yeah.
If it makes sense. Just hold on. So function, category, score based on the applicability. So the fourth column is interesting. This is the mitigation techniques you are talking about, correct?
Yeah.
Any technical organizational measures, and you are mapping it to NIST framework and GDPR. Okay.
Correct.
And India PDPB as well.
Yes.
So the what I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it rightly, Linden, right?
Yeah.
Linden.
Yeah.
So that privacy threat model, that exercise would reveal all these things, is what you're trying to tell me, right?
So so that is more of a framework. Now we are connecting the framework to the actual application through our through our product.
Fair enough. I would put it this way, that your application uses this framework to give us this kind of report back to us.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. So what you talked about, that CAA part, along with topics like unlinkability, intervenability, transparency, these are all what we talk about as part of performing the DPIA, if I'm right, correct?
Correct.
As part of GDPR.
Correct.
So all these concepts along with the NIST framework has been built in as part of your tool to give me this report. So the column 4 would be quite interesting to me. Do I have these measures built in my organization to take care of these privacy risks?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So quickly, I don't know how much time we have, but so this is how your anonymized data would look like, where let's say this is your original data where you have people have different ages, education, zip code, and marital status. You mentioned what is your level of anonymization. For example, no group should be less than 25. So it look into attributes of people and optimize the attributes in such a way that it can create groups of minimum 25. In this case, the group size is 32, right? 0 to 31, right? It does it for the entire data set. So you go to any group number, the group number would be greater than 25. So let's say we go to group number 18, right? The group size is count is 41, right? It has identified 41 people and aggregated them, optimize their attributes in such a way that it becomes a group of greater than 25, so that the utility of the data is retained. At the same time, the privacy is also protected. And we provide mathematical proofs of it, where we say that all groups have group size greater than what is required. This white dotted line, let us say this is 25, this is 25. All groups have a size of greater than 25. So it's just a simple graphical proof which gives you the confidence that now the data is anonymized, and we are the first globally to provide this along with anonymization.
Yeah, but Abhilash, the raw data is still be available with the company, right?
Yeah. So we are speaking about flows, right? When you are giving data, let us say from a healthcare organization to an insurance company, right? Now this you anonymize the data and give this data to the insurance company. So the insurance company has anonymized data. You will have both copies.
Okay. So in, the insurance company cannot identify me, but the
Correct.
parent company can still do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. See, the purpose is who is doing the downstream processing? Does he have the consent to process the data? In this case, let us say he does not have the consent to process the data, insurance company, right? How does a hospital give data to an insurance company or even to its own analytics organization when you don't have consent? You can't give the data.
Correct.
Right? So how do you give the data? You anonymize and then give the data so that it is not re-identifiable. So that's the objective we are meeting. Of course, the company will have both data sets. That's we are still looking from a security perspective. The security risk is still the same because you have taken the consent, you have the data, you are still responsible for holding the data secure.
Correct.
But we are speaking at the next level. How do you unlock the data to create value? Because what will you do with data in silo, right? That's the fundamental problem today, right? You can't do much with data sitting in silos. You have to unlock data. That is the value that a CAO, CTO, and the CISO brings in. So DPO cannot say that, no, you cannot take the data out, right? Without this technology,
Correct.
the data will remain in silos. And the company will never be able to utilize the data and achieve the potential that it can achieve sitting on the data. So that's what we do. We unlock the data so that you are compliant at the same time, create value to your customers, to your organization, to your stakeholder without violating privacy.
So primarily, this is a kind of a decision-making tool with regard to sharing data with third parties, right?
Even internal, right? Beyond the purpose of consented processing.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah,
Any processing you do internally or externally beyond the consent, which is mostly the case, right? How do you use the data? You anonymize it.
Why would you say internally? See, third party I can understand. Supposing, as Ramesh Kotha sir asked previously, you had a data set which contained PII, right? From that, you removed identifiers and created another data set, which you say is anonymized data set, correct? If you are sharing this data with a third party, which is not in possession of the original data set, which had the PII, then we can understand. But if you're sharing it internally with another department, even the second data set that you are sharing, data set B, okay, until unless you have some means by which you ensure that the original data set A is not once again associated with this de-identified data set B to re-identify. So the likelihood of re-identification would not get removed if you're sharing it internally, right? Unless you have certain other controls.
No.
It may be internally also may be required for various purposes.
Correct.
Somebody should have a data which is not required for its process. We can use our Abhilash methodology and eliminate that kind of internal risks also.
Absolutely.
Insiders attacks can be avoided.
I'll give a very simple example.
Yeah, okay.
Let's say you are collecting data where you are consenting only for product improvisation. Let's say you are a healthcare, you are giving a patch where you are monitoring the heart rate of a patient, right?
Okay.
You are saying that you will use the data only for improving your product. Now you have a marketing team which is in-house, right?
Okay.
And you have multiple other, let's say, products which will sell other healthcare products. By knowing the heartbeat of the patient, you can do upselling, cross-selling, but customer has not consented. Now, can you give this data to the marketing team or not? The heartbeat data of a patient, can you give it to your marketing team without his consent?
No way.
Correct. A pharmacy company goes and meets the hospital. I want all this data overall having the heartbeat so that I can propose this, this medicine, whatever it is. Can you give that kind of condition?
No way.
Right, exactly. You cannot give. And this is same in any industry. You take finance, right? Where you have transactional data. Can you give your transactional data where you have paid for your health or for your child's education, you have paid? Will you allow your data to be given to a marketing agency within the bank?
No,
You don't even know where the data will go, right? So this is a tricky question. This is how the whole ecosystem is. We don't. This is a common problem across the ecosystem, but with the consent-based restrictions coming, the purpose of processing is limited to the consent, whether it is internal or external. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'll take an example and then try to set. Subrayda sir, the point here is, let's say you have a hospital, you have all the patient information. That is the PII or PHI, whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my first dataset A, which
correct. Very good,
is
very good. Stay there.
Correct.
Stay there. Now I am going to convert that entire A set anonymized, and I call it as a set B, and be with me that from set of B data, you can never go back to A. Is that okay? I can never, because anonymization definition is very simple. Irreversibility is ruled out. Is that okay?
No, as long as, subject to caveat, as long as this second set, data set B, okay, the person who has the second data set B never has access to the original set data A, then the answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely. That is what the definition of anonymization. I understand your point. Is there a possibility that because within the organization we are referring to, correct?
Yeah, correct.
No, be with me. Let us assume that it is impossible. No way. Okay. I am going to give you set B. You will not even know the source of that A. Then I am going to use this set B set for my marketing, sales purpose, profiling, etc. It is done by sales team. Sales team does not have any relationship to, let's say, finance data or HR data. They got set of data, one database called, anonymized data. That's all. So it could be used internally, or it could be sold outside for any other purpose, as Abhilash was beautifully explaining.
No,
hope it's clear.
Yeah. See, my only question was internal always has this possibility that this second data set B, which has been given to the marketing team, right? Tomorrow, because this is a question within the organization, there is a chance that some attributes which were present in data set A could still be passed on to this team, there's a possible. How can you guarantee no way, Ramesh?
I'll tell you.
It's one organization, man. I have my friend. Both of us are going for a pub and tea.
No way.
Right?
No, then we don't
outside
have
the organization. Yes. See, outside the organization, I can understand because he might not even know what is the original data set A contain, right? So the likelihood of whether by design or by default.
Sir, I understood your question. There is an integrity here. Let me explain.
That's all, sir. Integrity, yes.
There is an integrity here. Let me explain that. So if it is a tokenized data, I think that's where your confusion or your question is coming from. If it is a tokenized data, then by sharing a column, re-identification to the original person is much more possible. For example, I have done a hash of all the, let's say, Aadhaar number, right, and given this data. Now, if I just share this table between your Aadhaar number and hash, this original mapping, then you can re-identify the entire data set, re-identify the entire set. This is exactly a problem, and hence the de-identified data, which has the potential for re-identification, is always considered still a personal data.
Correct.
So if a data is re-identifiable by just sharing a column, this is bound to be, as you said, rightly said, there is a high possibility of this leaking. Let's say, it goes to black market, and then there is a possibility of re-identification. Then this is called as, a re-identifiable data, and this is still called as personal data. This is not anonymous data. That is not anonymous data.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So when we are speaking about anonymous data, even if you release a column of data, it is not re-identifiable because multiple attributes have already changed. For example, the age has been made 1 to 16. And in the original data set, it would have been different. Or you would have introduced some local differential privacy errors, because of which it's very, very difficult to re-identify this row is this row, right? Even if you get some data, we are not getting into that. That may still be possible. But when you are actually getting unless you get the actual data, then you won't even do this exercise of trying to find out, from the anonymous data, which is
actually it is a different ballgame altogether. Yeah.
Correct. So this is the challenge, and this is the difference between re-identifiable data and anonymous data. Okay, so this is at one level. Of course, we are saying that, so the fundamental point is that beyond consent, whether it is internal or external, beyond the approved purpose, nobody should have access to any data. So the data flow should be minimized to such extent that depending upon the purpose of processing, the data should be minimized, and no purpose should be possible beyond that approved purpose on the data. This is the function of this is the responsibility of a DPO or a CISO.
Right.
And how does he do it? Today, he does not have tools. And that's where these tools are becoming very, very important for organizations to properly implement privacy regulations. And when it becomes global, especially global organizations, this becomes paramount for future.
Abhilash, on the lighter note, we expected DPO and CISO to be separate, not the same person.
Yeah, correct. Today, it's sort of becoming a clubbed role, but hopefully, I think in the future, we'll have DPOs reporting to board and have higher responsibilities.
Yeah, that's what FDPPI promotes.
Yeah, awesome. Really grateful for that. Okay, so that's all I have from my side. Looking forward for more questions. I have time, so if you have further questions, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Hey, hi, Abhilash. Sayogita here. Probably I don't have any question, but excellent presentation. And definitely this product, whatever you have presented right now, would be used to even organizations for their internal use, as you mentioned, as there are lots of data sets that go from one department to another department, and there needs to be some hashing done, and the next set of persons should not know about it. And I don't think so currently any organizations have this kind of features enabled, but going ahead, definitely this will be used for the organizations. Definitely internally, I see a lot of use of this product. I don't know how external vendors can use it, or probably how when the data is getting transferred outside, it can be of use. But definitely for internal organizations, say some data from an HR department to a finance department, or within HR also, it's going to the sub people, it will be of use. So definitely I see a lot of use coming out from this particular product. It would be a new theme of discussion going ahead into the product line of privacy specifically, not security anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. A privacy enabled product completely.
Yeah.
Great one. Great one.
Thank you so much. Great to see people who can resonate with this slightly complex idea in a very short period of time. And, it's really heartening to see people, resonating what we're trying to say.
Definitely. Abhilash, we'll probably have more round of discussions around your product to see how best can be put to use to organizations, and we can explore it more. Probably we got to see a very bird's eye view here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it, Sayagita.
Abhilash, I have a small question here. What are the parameters you calculated for the threat modeling for privacy here?
Sorry, your voice is breaking. What are the parameters that I have collected for?
Privacy threat modeling purpose.
Oh, threat modeling purpose.
Yeah.
So we are looking at, we are doing multiple attacks. See, threat modeling, it says linkability, identifiability, non-deniability, disclosability. These are the attributes which Linden provides. But these are terms, right? Philosophies. How do you connect it actually with the data is where we try to build set of algorithms to understand the risk, simulate some attacks which are proprietary, which we have patented as well, which we connect and then build a risk score and then map this risk score to these attributes and provide a recommendation.
Thanks, Abhilash. Actually,
Sorry, not able to hear you.
yeah, the risk scores, how we are going to calculate for the
Sorry, your voice is not audible. How do you calibrate the risk scores?
yeah. Actually, when we are doing the threat modeling, we will get some risk scores. Why? Because based on the availability and based on the calculations what we are providing to the threat modeling itself. But when I'm looking for the privacy, just I'm not getting any risk scores here. How we can get the risk score?
Yeah, so this is something that we have built because there is no standard globally. Probably what we have built will become a global standard someday. That's our perspective. But we have integrated a lot of mathematical models into it, and we have built a risk score so that it is simple for organizations to put it in data, a dashboard and understand. But there is no standard today saying that this is how you will measure the risk score.
Thanks, Abhilash. Thank you.
Not a question, Abhilash. Just wanted to know your experience. Basically, uh, a question which the privacy professionals always face from across the organization is what happens with the data after the retention period is over. It's the mostly asked question, and the common answer people gave is, the data is deleted. But we are aware of deleting data is not that easy. So I think the solution you have presented is basically the answer of the most common but uh, difficult to answer question from a privacy standpoint. So thank you for that. That I totally agree with you. But my question to you, not from the tool, from your experience, what I just said, have you seen this culture building up across the organization rather than deleting the data to maybe to go ahead and anonymize it, and then might keep it as an open data or big data or any such process? Have you seen this culture getting built? Just wanted to check with you.
Yeah, beautiful question, Anirban. So I think privacy, the entire privacy journey is a culture that we have to build, right? It's a cultural shock, I would say, the way we have used or abused data in the last 30 years. So the way we consider this is my data, not data subjects data, that mindset has to change. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental challenges in front of, let's say, FDPPI, or even in terms of
accountability.
yeah. So this is a cultural shift, and this is a mind shift that needs to come into organizations at a board level. It is not there today. People are like, forget about this. People are not even worried about storing consent, right? Don't even know where the data is, or no security controls. Not worried about what purpose the data is getting processed for. But these would cost these businesses big time in the future. They cannot become a global organization. They cannot be trustworthy in the digital world, which they cannot build platforms. If they people who don't see, as the technology adoption life cycle is there, right? You have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, right?
Yes.
These set of people will always be there, or industries, in every industry. So whoever gets onto the privacy bandwagon the earliest, implements these cultural changes in the organization, would be the leaders and early adopters, and they would bear the benefits of it. You are seeing what Apple is doing to the whole ecosystem, mobile ecosystem, just by using privacy as its primary value proposition.
Yes.
This is going to be reflected across the ecosystem, because people are afraid. People are beginning to know. Earlier, people used to say that, hey, I'm an open book, I don't care. Now the problem is, people are realizing that it is not about the good use of data, right? Nobody is going to go to court and then going to prosecute you because you are good or bad, right? It's about manipulating your thoughts, your own emotions, turning you against your own network of people, your own friends, that nobody wants, right? So these are not, so people are beginning to understand this. So privacy is about trust, trusting a brand. So brands, to build brands, companies have to build privacy. That's how I see it. So when they do that and people see it, people will give them more data. More data means more knowledge, more success, and it will become a flywheel. So this is what is going to be the future. And the earlier organizations adopt it, the better, else they will die.
Makes sense, Abhilash. I know you are doing it, but just a suggestion as a friend. What you said at the beginning, that once you anonymize the data, this data go beyond the scope of GDPR. Keep this line in your sales pitch all the time.
Okay.
Repeat it many times. That will attract people like me. We love it when some data is not in scope of GDPR. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the tip.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Excellent session, Abhilash. No, actually, I kept all of us on line beyond 30 minutes.
Yeah. You know,
Absolutely.
I think this is. I'm also feeling that this is part of, friends that we are interacting with, and it's very difficult to find a place where you find a lot of people with privacy knowledge, right?
One question to Navi sir. In the Navi sir, I remember when we were doing your FDPPI course and you had told that the re-anonymization and anonymization has got to be judged in the context of available technologies today at any given point in time. Certain technologies that are prevalent today might make people believe that a certain data set is not re-identifiable. But there are many moving parts here. Certain additional technologies that come onto the horizon tomorrow might possibly convert what was previously considered as a non-re-identifiable data can possibly be converted into identifiable. In that context, with the kind of tools and the way in which things are moving around, do you think it would be also useful to take the consent of data subjects to share their data in a de-anonymized way, given the fact that technology is always evolving? Sir, you're on mute. Sir, you're on mute now, sir.
Subraidu sir, I'm extending your question.
Yeah.
Similar situation. How about IoT systems also?
Yeah.
No, say de-anonymized data is part of the personal data. So if you want to disclose it, it is a consent for disclosure, or maybe for legitimate interest purpose, like the law enforcement requirements and other things. You are disclosing identifiable data. So when you say de-anonymized, it is actually identifiable data. Now, when it is anonymized, there can be a standard for anonymization, which is the best practice, or if the data protection authority declares a certain standard. This was what was envisaged in PDPP 2019, that the DPA will give certain standard. Now, how they will define the standard, we don't know. But anyway, it was envisaged. And once the data controller anonymizes the data as per the standard or the minimum level of standard which is fixed by the data protection authority, he is considered to have done his due diligence in terms of anonymization. And that anonymized data, that is anonymization as per the acceptable standard, is equivalent to non-personal data. It is outside the domain of data protection regulation. Now, technology and criminals will always try to break the whatever anonymization methods you might have used. So the data controller cannot protect against all the kinds of cyber crimes, including a quantum computing, say, breaking or something like that. So what PDPP 2019 envisaged was that once you meet the minimum standard and release it, then if anybody is able to de-anonymize it, he is actually punishable under Information Technology Act, and at that time PDPB 2019 also had a provision, re-identification of de-identified data. So today it may not be there, but ITA 2000 is sufficient. I will be making that person, say, punishable for 3 years of punishment, cognizable offense under Information Technology Act. So this de-anonymization is not a technology process. If technology people think that they are very intelligent and they will be able to de-anonymize an anonymized set, they are actually knocking at the doors of jails. Let me tell you, it is something which technology people should understand. You are not supposed to de-anonymize an anonymized set. If the anonymization has been done so weak that it can be easily de-anonymized, then you can say the data controller did not exercise full due diligence. You can say that he is negligent. This is similar to encryption. Say, if you encrypt a data, and if somebody finds a new technology to decrypt your highest secured encryption, there is a limitation in what I can do. I will try to use the best encryption technology which is available without negligence. In good faith, I release that as encrypted data. If somebody sits and does a, let us say, a brute force attack or something like that and breaks that encryption, you cannot hold it against me, the data controller. It is a crime and society has to handle it as a crime. So in future also, that is how we have to look at it. The anonymizer or the person who is the data controller, once the main purpose for data collection is over, then he has, if nothing else is there, he has to delete it, because it's a purpose-oriented consent. You are bound to delete it, even if the customer or the data subject doesn't specifically ask you. It is an automatic process. But if you convert it into anonymized data, you can say that it is no longer, it is deleted. See, deletion is equivalent to anonymization if your anonymization is of the required standard. Then you use it for research and other things. I feel the law should not have any problem in that. There is one more question which people will be asking is, do you require the consent of the data subject for anonymization? I personally feel that it should not be made essential, because anonymization is equivalent to deletion. Once it is no longer my personal data, why I should give permission for you to anonymize and use it in any particular form? Okay, and law should regulate the standard of anonymization. That's all. So these are some of the points which perhaps will get settled over a period of time. Okay, does it answer your questions, Subrahim?
Yeah, yes.
Navi sir, sir, I don't think GDPR expects that you need to take a consent from a data subject for anonymization.
No, it is not. It is not. Yeah, it is a new thought which came up when in India we were discussing the PDPB 2019 with the JPC and other things. Somebody put in the idea that we need consent for anonymization.
Not needed.
I feel it is actually a misnomer. You cannot have consent for anonymization. It's like it's a self-contradictory provision.
The point here is that if I am able to anonymize the data where it cannot be re-identified back, then I can do whatever I want. I don't need a consent from
it. That is what the industry would like to do. Okay. Now you try to control the standard of anonymization and say, if your anonymization is weak, I will say you are negligent. You have not anonymized properly. And if you have done a proper this thing, and if somebody tries to re-identify, then I will punish him as a crime. That is what we have to do as a society. Okay.
Right, sir.
Yeah, Manju is worried. We are 5 minutes over 8:30.
No, sir, as long as the discussion is exciting, happy to stay with. Thank you, Mr. Abhilash. When we discussed this concept, you said anonymization is a complex subject. Yet you beautifully unfolded the subject layer by layer and presented to all of us. It was such a fantastic session, interesting topic, interesting solution, and your presentation was also equally exciting. I'm sure everybody is looking forward to a sequel to this session. And we also hope in all the FDPPI's future endeavors, we will have your association and your compliance discussion.
Thank you,
Thank
Abhilash.
you.
Yes.
Thanks, Abhilash. Thank you.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
much.
It's my, I would say it's my pleasure to, be amongst such learned and, people who are passionate about privacy. It has been a privilege, and looking forward to continuing our collaboration and, sharing thoughts and sharing notes and learning from this elite group.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great
Thank
session.
you. Bye.
Thanks a lot,
Yeah,
Abhilash.
definitely.
Great.